What's up, guys? This is Kephas.
Welcome to SBA Spotlight. In these videos, I'll be covering how well the single button assistant performs for each spec, what it does well, where it falls short, and how to get the most out of it, especially if you're looking for a lower stress or more accessible way to play. So whether you're here to relax, overcome a limitation, or just see how far one button can take you, I've got you covered. Alright, so let's talk about Fire Mage and how it works with the single button assistant. This is going to be an interesting one because on one hand, it's actually very impressive with what the single button assistant is able to manage for Fire Mage, but on the other hand, you are going to experience a fairly notable DPS drop off if you use it. According to Wowhead, it estimates that you're going to lose about 30% of your optimal DPS potential. And what's interesting is that it estimates that for the assisted highlight, which is the other tool that will tell you what buttons to press, that only loses you about 10% of your optimal DPS. So what that shows me, whether you want to take these numbers with a grain of salt, is that there's a pretty big discrepancy here, and I think I understand why it is. The thing about Fire Mage is that it's a deceptively difficult class to play well. It has a fairly low skill floor, but a very high skill ceiling. The basic concept is easy to understand. Get 2 crits, then use Pyroblast or use Flame Strike, right? Very easy. But all the nuances and extra mechanics make it a very challenging class to play well, and so it can do a lot of damage if you take in all these nuances. The single button assistant doesn't take in a lot of these nuances, and in fact, it just kind of executes a very simplified version of your rotation. In other words, how effective this tool will be is very dependent on how good you already are at playing a Fire Mage. So like with a lot of the SBAs, I think that a lot of players are going to benefit from using it, especially if you're someone who struggles with keeping up with the mechanics. Because when you look at what the single button assistant actually does for Fire Mage, it's a lot. It's basically going to cover your entire rotation with the exception of Combustion, and we'll talk about how to manage that later. But what that means is that it's going to obviously cast Firebolt or Frost Firebolt. The guide on Wowhead right now says that there was a glitch where it wasn't using Frost Firebolt. As of now, it seems to be using it fine, so you're good to go if you want to play as a Frostfire hero class Fire Mage. Either way, it'll use your filler to get a crit, and then once you're heating up, it will use Fire Blast to activate Hot Streak. I have noticed, and this might be something that contributes to a DPS loss, it does not save Phoenix Flames for heating up. It will just simply use it whenever it's available. So sometimes it'll use it to activate heating up, and sometimes it will use it to activate Hot Streak if you're already heating up. It just depends on when Phoenix Flames is available. Once you have Hot Streak, it will use Pyroblast, or it will even use Flame Strike, which is a ground targeting ability, which is very nice. Like with a lot of these other ones, it will use ground targeting abilities, including Meteor as well, which is also very important if you're Frostfire. The single button assistant will even use shifting power once it's used some of your other cooldowns, which is nice. Just make sure that you don't start moving once this actually starts casting shifting power. That's very important. And for the most part, it does seem to keep track of some of your other procs. There's a lot that you can keep track of here, so for me, it can get a little overwhelming with my vision. But what I did notice is that sometimes it would use Scorch, but the single button assistant seems to get hung up whenever I start moving. Now, this is my experience. I was expecting it to switch over to Scorch when I started moving, and sometimes it seemed to use it. A lot of times it wouldn't. It would prioritize any instant cast abilities if they were ready in the priority. However, whenever there was nothing, it would get hung up. It seems like even when I'm moving, it wants to try to cast Fireball, not Scorch. That's unfortunate. I don't know if it's a limitation of the tool or what it is, but the only solution I can think of is if you're moving and you need to cast Scorch a lot, then you might want to have Scorch on a separate button. That's the best thing that you can do. And again, it will not manage Combustion. This is your main offensive cooldown. The good news is that Combustion is off the global cooldown, so you are able to put Combustion in a default macro with the single button assistant and then use that, and then Combustion would be used on cooldown. So whether you think that's ideal or not, if you're obviously using the tool, you're not too worried about being super optimal, that's something else that you can do to have one less button to worry about. And you can also macro in any on-use trinkets that you have, and that'll help you out with those as well, because those are also off the global cooldown. And I will have a macro in the description that will do all of that for you, and you can just copy it into your game in a default macro and use it accordingly. Now, something else that this macro is going to do is it's going to add a no channeling conditional to the single button assistant, because the single button assistant uses shifting power, and if you continue to press the button after shifting power is activated, it will absolutely interrupt it. So even if you don't want a combustion macro, you should definitely create a macro with the single button assistant using this no channeling conditional. Again, it will be in my macro, but that way you will never interrupt your shifting power unless you move. Overall, aside from the aforementioned abilities, I am very impressed with what the single button assistant is able to manage for Fire Mage. Like I said, it is doing a lot of heavy lifting, managing procs, ground targeting abilities and everything. So I think that for a lot of people, it can be very beneficial. Certainly for an accessibility tool, it's very useful. And if you're a casual player, if you're someone that struggles with tracking all of these things, it will probably help you out. But the big takeaway is that there is a considerable deficit if you use it, which means that there's lots of room for improvement if you want to get better as a Fire Mage and go beyond the DPS threshold of the single button assistant. Basically what I mean by that is, if you want to get better at playing a Fire Mage and do more damage, obviously I would recommend that you don't use the single button assistant. You learn how to play the class and you work on getting better and improving your skill, and there's a lot of room for improvement here. However, if you're a casual player, if you have a disability, or you're looking for some form of simplification, accessibility, or whatever, this tool is going to do a lot for you, and it's essentially extremely user-friendly. With a macro, it will cover your entire rotation, and that's pretty much everything I've learned for now. But as always, I'd love to hear from you. What do you think of the single button assistant, and how is it working out for you so far? Let me know in the comments. But with all that being said, I will see you guys on the next one.
Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, let me know by clicking that like button. And feel free to share it with your friends so they can enjoy it as well. And if you'd like to see more videos, you can subscribe to the channel and click on the bell icon to be notified as soon as new videos are posted. You can also follow me on Facebook, and if you'd like, you can support my work on Patreon. Links to all that stuff can be found in the description below. This is Kephas. Until next time.